Alrighty, so today what I want to talk about is the film camera, which we have here, which is the Nikon FM10. So if I flip this over, this is the FM10 Nikon camera. So you're going to notice that looks a little bit different than what we use typically with our digital cameras, right? First and foremost, there is no screen on the back, so we cannot see what we shoot anymore. So we are kind of stuck in the dark, no pun intended, but we still have some similar things. All right, so if we look here at our lens, see if I can focus in on this, right? So you're going to notice that we have a couple things. First and foremost, we have a shutter dial, okay? So this shutter dial is going to change the shutter speed, right? So 1/4 of a second, 1/8 of a second, 1/15th, 30th, 60th, 1/25th, 250, 500, and so forth, right? You're also going to notice there's a little ISO window here, right? So that little ISO window right here at the top, that little window is going to actually just remain the same because we always shoot with 400 ISO film, all right? Couple other things here. So we have our shutter dial, we have our shutter button, and we have our film advance, right? So on those sheets or on that slide deck that you're working on, I want you to go in and label those parts, right? Shutter dial, the shutter, and the film advance switch, okay? This little button we'll talk about shortly. This little window here is going to actually tell you what shot you're on. So in a roll of film, we get 36 shots. So that's going to tell you what photograph you're currently on, all right? Now, on the lens, actually, before I get ahead of myself, we'll stay on the camera body. Okay, we have a lens release button. So as I take that button, I can turn that lens and take that lens off and put that lens back on, very similar to our digital cameras. And then this button here is the most important button on the camera. This is our light meter. So as we look through our viewfinder, I wish there was a way that I could show you this. I don't know if there is. Let's see if this will work. That'd be so awesome. Yeah. You can see there's a red light in there. See that in the viewfinder? There's a red and a green light. So as I push that button, I'm going to get my light meter. So that's going to tell me if I'm underexposed, good exposure, or overexposed. So really kind of awesome. We were able to see that. So on the front of the camera, we obviously we have our light meter, we have our shutter release, and so forth. Now on the back of the camera, pretty blank, we have our viewfinder. Up here on the top, we have our film wind. So this is going to allow us to rewind our film before we take the film out. And this actually opens the back of the camera. Now, we don't have any film in here. You can't see any film in this little window, right? But what we never want to do is open the back of the camera if we have film in it. And the reason for that is the film can be exposed to light. So to open this though, I'm going to pull on this and pop that open. And the back of my camera will open up. You're going to notice we have our shutter. Never stick your fingers in there because it will break, okay? The film gets put on this side and gets attached on this side. And actually you'll notice, I'll go ahead and I'll show you what that shutter looks like. So that's the film crank, and then if I hit the shutter button, you'll see that shutter. And I'll go a little slower for you so you can see what this looks like. Crank, now watch that shutter. There we go. So that is that film advance, right? So that's the back of the camera. We'll put some film in a second. Now, on the lens, obviously we have our shutter dial. We have our f-stops, right? We have f22, and I'll turn this so you can see this a little bit better. Turn it that way. There we go. We have f22, okay, f16, f11, 8, 5.6, and 3.5. So as I turn this dial, I can set my aperture, right? Pretty cool. And what's actually kind of awesome is if I take this lens off and you look inside this, you'll notice that as I change this aperture, look at that. Notice the aperture opening and closing. Pretty awesome, right? So we can see how that aperture changes, right? So that would be f3.6, f5.6, or f3.5, f5.6, f8, f11, f16, and f22. So pretty awesome there, right? So that's those f-stops, and that's on that lens. And then these other numbers are just some focal length numbers that allow us to zoom or kind of change that focal length. All right. So now let's go ahead and let's actually add some film to this camera. All right. So again, to open that film, or to open that back of the camera, I pull that up, and I'm going to open up my camera. Now the film's going to come in these really cool little containers. And I'll pull that film out. Now when we have film, we basically are given a good amount of space for waste, right? Because this is going to get exposed to light, which is totally okay, totally fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my film in, just like so. Put that down. And I'm going to pull the film across the camera. And I'm going to actually slip the film into this little compartment here. I'll just go in and show you. So there's some slits in this little piece here. So that allows me to stick that film in that slit, and it'll pull. And now what I'm going to do, focus in on this again for you, is I'm going to hit my film advance. It's going to pull that film. And I'll pull it one more time. So I do 2 cranks. And now I'm good to go. So how this works is when I shoot my photo, it actually writes an image right here on the film. And then as I crank it, I'll do one there. As I crank it, it pulls it across and leaves another space. Now, I'll close that. And you're going to notice the green there. Okay? So that means now that green, okay, means that I have film in this camera and can no longer open the back. If I open the back of this, whatever photographs I've taken, I've actually ruined, okay? So we want to make sure that if we have film in there, we never, ever, ever take that back and open it up. So now my film camera is ready to go, locked and loaded, and ready to go out and shoot some shots. And you'll notice here at the top, as I advance, watch that S, I get to my first shot. And you get 36 shots in a roll of film. 36 shots in that roll of film, which is really awesome. See if I can get that autofocus back on there for you. See a little bit clearer. So there we go. So that there is our Nikon FM10. So I'm going to go through some of these parts again, starting with the top, because you want to label these. So today what I'd like you to do is go onto that Google slide, draw some lines and label each part based on the picture that you have. We have the shutter, or not the shutter, this is the shutter dial, right? The speed dial, so that gives us all the speeds. This is our shutter, so that takes the picture, this button right here. This is our film advance lever, so this allows us to advance our film to the next shot. This is our shot window, so that tells us what number shot we're on. And then this is our film wind, right? So that allows us to wind the film and also open the back of the camera. Now let's go to the front. On the front of the camera, this actually we didn't talk about. This is a self-timer. So as I shoot, that'll actually create a timer. This is the lens release button on the left there. And this is your best friend, most important button, your light meter, right? We want to make sure that we know that because we always need to use that light meter. On the lens, we have our zoom. We have our focus. We have our aperture. Okay. And those are the 3 main components of that lens. Lastly, on the back of the camera, we have the camera door and the film window. So I'd like you to go through, watch that video, and label essentially every part of that camera. On Thursday, we're going to partner up You're going to get a film camera with a roll of film, and we're going to go outside and take some film shots. Next week, we'll talk about developing. Best of luck.